Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet AFL Round 11 betting review. My name is Reese, and in this video we're going to run through all 9 games from the weekend in the AFL. We're going to look at them from a betting perspective, who won, who covered the spread, did the game go over or under the total. We'll look at some trends for each team and their betting trends up until this point of the season with information you can use moving forward. We'll also look at overall betting trends in terms of the whole AFL, and we'll also break down in terms of some of the statistics of how teams won each of these games or how other teams lost them. Overall, it was a pretty mediocre round. The first game, Geelong versus Western Bulldogs, was expected to be and was by far the best game of the round. Every other game was a bit mediocre as expected. There were a few upsets in there, but they weren't really close contested games that really came down to the wire and had exciting fourth quarters. But that doesn't really matter. The purpose of what we're doing here as part of InvestorBet is betting on the AFL and making money on the AFL. So we're not doing it for entertainment. And I always say to everyone, if you're betting for entertainment, then don't bother betting, because to make money betting, you need to look at it from a different perspective. Basically, you want to view it as an investment, or kind of as you're running a side business in doing this. And that's what's going to allow you to consistently make strategic decisions that will allow you to profit in terms of what bets you're putting on, how much you're staking on them, as opposed to just finding random bets, betting on a game just because you're going to watch it, or just because it's the only game on that day, or the game's about to start and you're on Sportsbet or you're on TAB or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm going to quickly put a bet on this game. Those decisions and betting just for entertainment, or just because your team's playing, or you don't like a team so you're going to back against them, all those things will result in you losing money long term. And this channel and the videos I make are designed to help you make sure that you're profiting consistently every single month. So overall in the season so far, 54 games have gone under the total, 44 games have gone over. So plus 10 in favor of the under. This weekend, 5 games went under, 4 went over. I'll break down which games they are as we go through them. Home teams won 5 games. Away teams covered 5 of the 9 games. So far this season, home teams are 51-47 against the spread. Favourites won 7 of the 9 games on the round. The underdogs who won, GWS beating Carlton and the Brisbane Lions beating Hawthorn. This was the first time this year the Brisbane Lions were an underdog. Favourites covered in 6 of the 9 games. This season, favourites are 50-48 with a slight winning record against the spread. Richmond were the only underdog to cover the spread but not win the game outright. First game on the Thursday night, Geelong versus Western Bulldogs. Geelong winning by 14 points, 127-113. They covered the spread, but they're $1.54 out to $1.83. The game went over the total of 174.5, but moved down through the week from 177.5. So the market moved in the wrong direction on both sides in this game. Geelong have covered 7 of their past 9 now, and 3 of their last 4 games have gone over the total. Western Bulldogs have now lost 2 of their past 3. They have a 6-5 record on the season. They have covered the spread in their last 5 wins, but have failed to cover in their last 4 losses. So basically, Western Bulldogs are either winning the game and covering, or losing the game and not covering. So a lot of the time when they are underdogs, you're better off taking them to win the game outright. It's the way it's been going so far this year. 6 of their past 8 games have gone over the total. Overall, for this game, it was a high-scoring opening term, 5 goals each. The Western Bulldogs led by 3 points at quarter time, with a late goal here by Aaron Norton to put them in front 34-31. But in the second quarter, Geelong kicked 6 goals to 1 and built a 25-point lead at halftime. The Western Bulldogs got a late goal again in the second term through Aaron Norton once again to bring the margin back a little bit going into the main break. Third term was pretty even, but the Western Bulldogs got momentum late. They kicked 4 of the last 5 goals of that term and got the margin back to 10 points at three-quarter time, 101-91. Then in the fourth quarter, they got a real quick goal through Ed Richards, which brought the margin back under a goal. And from here, it was anybody's game. The Western Bulldogs eventually got it back to a 1-point margin, but from there, Geelong went on a run and kicked 3 straight goals, which won them the game. Statistically, in this game, the Geelong had 27 scoring shots, but the Western Bulldogs had 33. So even though Geelong had 6 less scoring shots, they still won this game by 14 points. So ultimately, poor goal kicking and accuracy by the Western Bulldogs was ultimately the difference. Or Geelong, being super accurate, won them the game. Free kicks 26-12 in favour of Geelong. Western Bulldogs dominated the centre clearances in this game. 20-10 stoppages were fairly even. Western Bulldogs outscored Geelong 76-50 from the stoppages, but they were made to pay on the turnovers. So turnovers for both sides were fairly low, 54 by the Bulldogs, 49 by Geelong. However, Geelong scored 70 points from these 54 turnovers compared to the Western Bulldogs just scoring 37 from the Cats' 49 turnovers. Now that right there is a 33-point difference between the two teams from a very similar number of turnovers, and ultimately the difference in the game. Even when you factor in the stoppage, and Geelong have found the way to beat the Western Bulldogs here, as Bulldogs didn't really make that many turnovers. They don't average a huge number, but were able to make them pay. So if teams apply pressure, force turnovers, then they're well and truly a shot of beating the Bulldogs. Geelong travel over to Perth to play the West Coast Eagles. If they win that game, they'll go to 8-4 on the season. The Western Bulldogs have the bye this week, and then we'll play Hawthorn on Thursday night at Marvel Stadium. The Friday night game, Essendon beat Richmond 81 points to 58, so a 23-point margin. Essendon won the game, but Richmond covered the spread. They're $1.28 into $1.27, and the game went under the total, which moved from 163.5 down to 158.5. Essendon are putting together a decent record. However, they have had an easy draw so far, so it's going to be interesting to see how they go in the second half of the season. They've won 6 of their past 8 games, however, have failed to cover 5 of their past 6. So they're getting the job done, but not doing it as well as to be expected. 7 of their last 8 games have gone under the total. Richmond still sit at 3 wins. They have covered 4 of their past 6 games. Their last 7 straight games have gone under the total. Low scoring game, this one, like very few points. Essendon kicked 6 goals to 4 in the first half and led by 9 points at the main break, 40 points to 31. There was only the 3 goals scored in total in the first quarter. Like throughout this game, teams mostly went goal for goal through the first half and then most of the term. However, midway through the third quarter and then into the fourth, that's where Essendon put this game away. They went on a run, kicked 4 straight goals from this period here. Once Richmond, Sam Laylor put Richmond in front, Essendon went on a run. Peter Wright scored, Archie Perkins, and then Peter Wright got the second goal, which that pushed the margin out just under 30 points. And from there, Essendon were able to maintain that winning lead fairly comfortably. A late goal through Richmond brought the margin back a little bit and was the difference in Richmond covering the spread or not covering the spread. Essendon had 26 scoring shots to Richmond's 18 in this game. Essendon, though, were pretty inaccurate, kicking 11 goals, 15. Plus 100 disposals for the Bombers, 442 to 342. Plus 52 handballs, plus 48 kicks. Inside 50s were only plus 7 in Essendon's favour, but they were a lot more efficient going inside 50, having the additional 8 scoring shots as well for just a plus 7 extra entries. Stoppage clearance, this is where Essendon was super dominant, 37-17, so a plus 20 differential at the stoppages. However, they weren't able to convert that dominance into scores from stoppages. In terms of that, Essendon only scored 36 points. Richmond only got 14 of their own, but it was only a plus 22 differential considering they were plus 20 the stoppages. Both teams made above average turnovers. Essendon with 76, Richmond with 67. However, neither side really capitalized majorly on that. Essendon outscored them 39-31 from turnovers. Richmond should have scored more than 31 points from 76 turnovers by Essendon. They really missed some opportunities there that could have made this game a lot closer, especially considering they were in front midway through the third quarter. Following this, Essendon are on a 6-day turnaround to go up to Brisbane and play the Brisbane Lions at the Gabba, and Richmond are up to Sydney to play GWS this weekend. Speaking of GWS, they got back on track with a win over Carlton, winning 110 points to 82, 28-point margin. GWS covered as an underdog here. They were $1.97 out to $2.40. The game went over the total, which moved up from 168.5 up to 170.5. Carlton have lost and failed to cover 3 of their last 4. Just after, the last month has been just after they look to get their season a little bit more back on track. They sit with a 4-7 record right now. This was just their second game to go over the total on the season. They have a 9-2 under record. Important win for GWS. They get to 6-5 on the season. They've covered in their last 4 wins and have failed to cover in all losses. Just one as an underdog. So they've only had the one game as an underdog where they have lost. However, what this tells us is similar to the Western Bulldogs. If you're going to back GWS, if you're considering them on the handicap, just take them to win the game instead. Looking at the timeline here, Carlton got off to a good start. They kicked the first 2 goals of the game, but GWS were able to get the lead back before quarter time. There was 10 goals scored in this first term. GWS led 32-31 at the first break. Low scoring second term, 20 points for GWS and just 11 points for Carlton. GWS outscored them 3-1, a total of just 4 goals in that term after 10 in the first quarter. But GWS extended their lead to 10 points at halftime. Then they extended their lead again in the third quarter, kicking 4-3 during that term. They led by 14 going into the 3-quarter time break. And we've spoken previously, Carlton are a really good first half side, but fall away in the second half, and that trend once again continued. Carlton did get a quick goal right at the beginning of the fourth quarter, which definitely gave them hope. It brought the margin back under 10 points, but ultimately GWS controlled that fourth quarter. They kicked the final 3 goals of the game to end up winning by 28 points. In terms of scoring shots, 22 for Carlton, 25 for GWS. However, they are very accurate, 17 goals, 8. Carlton were plus 11 inside 50s, so extremely inefficient in going inside 50, particularly compared to GWS, as they only had 47. Considering they had a plus 11 advantage in inside 50s, but managed 3 less scoring shots overall, that was the thing that proved costly. GWS's defense stood up. Carlton just inefficient going inside 50. And in terms of GWS, they were super efficient. To have 25 scoring shots from 47 entries and 17 goals, really, really good numbers. Carlton plus 12 in free kicks. Stoppages, 29-26, slightly in favour of Carlton. And with that plus 3 differential here, Carlton were able to outscore them 53-27 in scores from stoppages. That they did take advantage of GWS' lack of depth in the midfield in this game due to injuries. However, in terms of turnovers, this was where ultimately the difference was in this game. GWS had 64 turnovers, so they had 3 more turnovers than Carlton. However, from these 61 turnovers, GWS were able to generate 83 points compared to Carlton just generating 29 from GWS's 64 turnovers. So massive difference there, 54 overall differential. Carlton only the 17 scores from their defensive half as well in this game, whereas GWS had 57. So GWS Giants were able to move the ball a lot easier and transition it down the field. Carlton have the bye this week, then they'll play Essendon at the MCG. GWS have a home game this week against Richmond, where they'll look to put another win on the board and get their season somewhat back on track. Hawthorn versus the Brisbane Lions. The Lions winning down in Melbourne. They broke a 5-game losing streak against Hawthorn, winning 93 points to 60, 33-point margin overall. Brisbane won as the underdog and covered the spread. They are 225 out to 280, and the game went under 174.5, which moved up from 172.5. Hawthorn back-to-back losses, and they do have a tricky run the next 3 weeks, which I'll get to in a second. 3 of their last 4 games have gone under the total. Brisbane Lions, this is their first game and first win, obviously, as an underdog this season. They're still 4-7 against the spread. 3 of their last 4 games have gone under the total. Brisbane Lions kicked the first 2 goals of the game, but Hawthorn responded. They kicked the final 3 goals of that first quarter and were able to lead by 4 points at quarter time. But it was the second term where Brisbane blew the game wide open, and particularly Charlie Cameron, he kicked 3 goals in really quick succession right here. The game was tied midway through the second term, and then Cameron went goal, goal, goal in a space of 3 or 4 minutes, absolute max during that time. Really quick succession, and that blew the margin out, followed by a Levi Ashcroft goal. And at halftime, Brisbane had gone from being tied to leading by 23 points in the final 10 minutes or so of that term. Just the 2 goals scored for each side in the third quarter, so it remained fairly even, but the Lions kicked the first 3 goals off the final quarter, and that was ultimately able to put Hawthorn out of reach at that stage. In terms of scoring shots, Brisbane had 23, Hawthorn had 20, so +3 advantage, but Brisbane were the much more accurate side, and they were able to do that from only a +2 inside 50 differential. So inside 50s were fairly even, so Brisbane not only more accurate but more efficient going inside 50. Clearances massively in favour of the Brisbane Lions here, 41-24, both at the centre and at the stoppages. Scores from stoppages, Brisbane Lions 35, Hawthorn only 9 points from stoppages, extremely poor number. Brisbane Lions made 71 turnovers, so almost 10 more than their season average, and still outscored Hawthorn here. They scored 52 points from Hawthorn, 64 turnovers, where Hawthorn only managed 45 from the Lions, 71 turnovers. Both sides had 110 marks, really high numbers from that perspective, but ultimately a pretty dominant Lions win. Hawthorn will play Collingwood on Friday night, and followed by the Western Bulldogs and Adelaide, which that right there is what I mean when I say Hawthorn's next 3 weeks is really tough. They've not only lost against Gold Coast last week and Brisbane Lions just gone, but now they have to play Collingwood, the Western Bulldogs and Adelaide over the next 3 weeks. They definitely need to pick up 2 wins from these next 3 games. Still sitting well in the top 8. Brisbane Lions bounced back from their win against Melbourne. They're now on a 5-day turnaround to make it back-to-back wins, but they're at home against Essendon. On Saturday afternoon, Collingwood beat North Melbourne 108 points to 63, winning by 45 points. Collingwood covered the spread here, but they're $1.14 out to $1.25. There are a lot of games where the market moved the wrong way this weekend in the AFL. This game also went under the total, which moved up from 175.5 up to 176.5. North Melbourne, they still sit at 2 wins on the season, 1 draw. This was the first time they've conceded over 100 points since round 6. Last 4 games, though, have still all gone under the total. Collingwood posted another win. They've now won 9 of their last 10 games. The only loss was a 3-point game against Geelong, where they did have a shot to win the game on the siren. They've also covered 6 of their past 8 games. Both sides struggled to score early in this game, kicking just 3 total goals in the first term. Collingwood kicked 2, North Melbourne kicked 1. In the second term, though, this is where North Melbourne really gave themselves a shot at winning this game. They outscored Collingwood 5 goals to 2 during that quarter, kicked the final 3 goals of the quarter to lead by 9 points at halftime. And Collingwood didn't really have the best history against North Melbourne, and so I think there was a few worries going around at that stage, but they came out of the half. They kicked the first 3 goals, but 2 quick ones, which got them the lead back. North Melbourne, though, didn't give up. Once Collingwood had this little run, they established an 11-point lead. North Melbourne responded, kicked 2 goals to get back in front, and then going into 3-quarter time, Collingwood were only leading by 3 points. However, Collingwood dominated the 4th quarter like we've seen them do many times to teams and just be the stronger side late in the game. They kicked 6 straight goals at the beginning of this 4th quarter, pushed the margin right out, and ultimately kicked 8 goals to 1 in that final term to win the game by 45 points. 33 scoring shots to 18, so plus 15 in favour of Collingwood for only a plus 10 inside 50 differential. So they're much more efficient at generating shots. Had they been more accurate, they probably win this game by a lot more. 15 goals, 18. Definitely not the greatest accuracy numbers. North Melbourne won the stoppages 33-25, but Collingwood outscored them 45-34 in scores from stoppages. Collingwood only had 49 turnovers. North Melbourne had 61, and from these 61 turnovers, Collingwood scored 63 points, whereas North Melbourne only managed 17 points from Collingwood's 49 turnovers. And that right there, 46 differential, was the difference basically in the scoreline. North Melbourne have the bye this week, and then they're over to WA to play the West Coast Eagles in Bunbury. And Collingwood will play Hawthorn on Friday night. Both those sides are on a 6-day turnaround. Fremantle beat Port Adelaide 100-51. 49-point margin in favour of the Dockers at home here. They are backed in from $1.58 to $1.33 and covered the spread. The game went under the total. and moved down from 167.5 to 165.5. So market was spot on both sides in this game. Fremantle make it back-to-back wins. They go to 6-5 on the season. I spoke about it in the preview. This was an important game for Fremantle in particular to get above a 50% win rate. They've covered the spread in all wins but failed to cover in all losses this year. 4 of their past 5 games have gone under the total. This was Port's 4th straight loss. They've also failed to cover the spread in 4 of their last 5, and their last 4 games have gone under the total. Both teams kicked 3 goals in the opening term, but Fremantle held a narrow 2-point lead at quarter time. They went on to lead at every break and extend their margin at the end of each quarter. After halftime was really where Fremantle dominated this game. In the second half, they kicked 9 goals to 2, and they also kept Port Adelaide goalless in the third quarter. You can see just the 2 points going from 34 up to 36 from halftime to 3-quarter time. So that was ultimately the game-winning quarter. 25 scoring shots to 16. Fremantle pretty accurate, 67% accuracy, whereas Port Adelaide going under 50%. Inside 50s were actually very even, 56 to 55. So considering Fremantle had a +9 shots on goal differential, they were a lot more efficient going in at 50, and their defense stood up. Clearances also fairly even in this game, 12 to 11, 36 to 32. However, Fremantle scored 41 points from stoppages, whereas Port Adelaide only scored 14. Turnovers, Port Adelaide 74 turnovers, and Fremantle scored 58 points from those turnovers. Whereas even though Fremantle had 65, still a fairly high number of turnovers, Port only managed 31 points from those turnovers, and a really low 68 marks by Port Adelaide. They weren't able to maintain possession in terms of controlling the ball, relied on a high number of handballs, and whilst they did limit Fremantle's disposal a little bit, Fremantle aren't a high disposal side, so the fact they also went a fair bit over their season average. Fremantle travelled to Gold Coast to play the Suns on Saturday. That sets up to be a really good game. Port Adelaide have the bye this week, and then they are up to Sydney to play the GWS Giants. On to the first game on Sunday. Adelaide, 128 points to 62 winners over the West Coast Eagles. They won by 66 points. They are really short favourites, $1.05 into $1.04, and the game went over the total, which moved up from 165.5 up to 173.5. Adelaide are now 7-4 on the season and have covered 8 of their last 11. So really exceeding expectations this year. This was their first over game since round 5 against Geelong, and we did back Adelaide to get back on track with their scoring here. So they did that, but particularly did it in the second half. Disappointing loss for the Eagles. They have covered 4 of their past 6 though. 4 of their past 5 games have gone over, so lately have been involved in a lot more high-scoring games. Overall, this game was an even contest through the first quarter, most of the second, and then early in the third. Whilst Adelaide were leading the entire game, it always felt like West Coast were just hanging around a little bit. They weren't letting Adelaide run right away with it. Adelaide had a 6-point lead at quarter time. They extended that out to a 19-point lead at halftime on the back of 3 of the last 4 goals of the quarter. Jake Waterman got one right on the halftime siren. Late in the third quarter, though, this is when the game really broke open. Adelaide kicked 7 goals to 1, including this run of 5 straight goals from midway through the third, and they were able to go into the 3-quarter time break with a 57-point margin, which they extended on again in the fourth quarter, kicking 4 goals to 2 overall. 33 scoring shots to 22, Adelaide plus 11 in scoring shots. West Coast were also pretty inaccurate, so this game probably could have exceeded 200 points scored had West Coast been a bit more efficient with their shots on goal. Plus 11 inside 50s in favour of the Crows. Disposals plus 104. Huge differentials here, particularly also in the kicks as well. Handballs, not a major difference. Both sides somewhat on par with their season averages, but kicks are well and truly up there for the Crows and down for the Eagles. Stoppages, 32 to 24 in favour of the Crows. Adelaide outscored them 58 to 24 from stoppages. Turnovers, West Coast made 65 turnovers that Adelaide turned into 70 points. And from the Crows, 61 turnovers. West Coast only managed 36 points. So you can see a real trend here. A lot of these games are purely being one of which teams are able to be more efficient and capitalize on the opposition turnovers. Only 60 marks for the Eagles compared to 107, big differential, and then off that 57 tackles for the Eagles. Even though it's their average, still not great when the opposition who's winning the game by 60 points is making 16 more tackles than you in the game and having significantly more of the ball as well. It's not like that was even either. Adelaide are up to Sydney this week to play the Swans on Saturday, and West Coast have a home game this week against Geelong. And the next 3 games are all going to be in Perth or in WA, and 8 of their final 12 games will be as well. So West Coast, to close out the final 3 months of the season, have a lot of games where they don't need to travel. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pick up a few extra wins. Melbourne beat the Swans 131-78, 53-point margin. Melbourne covered the spread here. They were backed into favoritism. They were 210 into $1.87. The game went over the total, which moved down from 170.5 to 167.5. This is Melbourne's 5th win in their last 6 games. They're now 5-6 on the season after starting the season 0-5. It's really turned it around. They've covered 5 of their last 6, and 5 of their last 6 games have also gone over the total. 131 points for a side that couldn't score in the first month and a half of the season. Really impressive from that perspective. The Swans, they've now lost 5 of their last 7 games. They sit at 4-7 on the year, have failed to cover 5 of their last 7, so not only they're losing, they're also not even keeping games close and within the expectations. 3 of their last 4 games have gone under the total. Melbourne kicked the first 2 goals of the game and held an 8-point lead at quarter time. They extended on it slightly in the second, but probably could have done a bit more damage. They kicked 3 goals, 8 during that second term. It had 11 scoring shots to 2, so 22-point margin at half time. It could have been significantly more had they been more accurate. In the third quarter, Melbourne went on a run late in the term. They kicked 4 straight goals going into the 3-quarter time break. Swans got one back late there, but ultimately at this point, the margin was creeping out around that 6-goal mark, which makes it very difficult to come back with just a quarter to play. In the fourth quarter, once again, Melbourne dominated 8 goals compared to 5, so it's a very high scoring, 13 goals in that last quarter, 83 total points. If you back the over here, you're obviously thankful for this fourth quarter, which pushed it over the number, but another 8-goal term, 2 behinds for Melbourne, got them 131 points, 36 scoring shots to 18, so double the scoring shots in favour of Melbourne. They're also plus 20 inside 50s. They kept the Swans just 44 entries, had 64 stoppages, 30-25 in favour of Melbourne. Melbourne outscored them 43-31 from the stoppages, but turnovers was also where there was a big difference between the two sides, plus 20 more turnovers for the Swans. They had 73 compared to Melbourne just making 53. Melbourne scored 82 points from those 73 turnovers. Whilst Melbourne made 53, the Swans still did score 47 points from those turnovers. 16 marks inside 50. Both sides had 82 or more tackles, which is significantly above their averages, both averaging in the mid to high 50s and were around the 25 to 30 higher than their season average. Melbourne go up to Darwin to play St Kilda this week, and they have an okay record there. They've won 2 of their past 4. St Kilda, this will be their first game up there. Sydney have a home game against the Crows, and it's basically a must-win for them. We'll cover that a bit more when we look at the ladder in a second. St Kilda lost to Gold Coast in the final game of the round. The Suns winning 80 points to 61. Gold Coast covered the spread. They're $1.75 into $1.50. The game went under the total of 171.5, which moved up from 170.5. St Kilda have now lost 6 of their last 7 games and also failed to cover in all losses this season. They've been an underdog a number of times, but aren't even keeping it close in those games. 3 of their last 4 games have also gone under. And I went ahead and looked at the Saints draw moving forward, and like at this stage, it really does look like their season's probably done post the bye. So they have Western Bulldogs, Collingwood, then Fremantle over in Perth, Hawthorn, Sydney, and Geelong. That's their next 6 weeks. Of those 6 games, I feel like 2 wins would be a big achievement, and that's not going to do a great deal in terms of their overall season. So it does look like a rough end of the year for the Saints. Gold Coast, this was their third straight win. They're now 8-2 on overall. They've covered 60% of their games. They've also had 60% of their games go over the total. Low scoring first quarter, which ultimately set up this game going under the total. The Suns kicked 2 early goals and ultimately kicked 4 of the 5 goals in the opening quarter. They led 26-8 at quarter time, so an 18-point margin. Through the second term, there were a few moments where St Kilda tried to even the game back up, but every time they did that, Gold Coast responded with 2 goals. It happened firstly there, Ben Long scored, then Jed Walter. The Saints got it back to the 10 points again, and then 3 quick goals to end the half by the Suns. That put them out to a 29-point lead at halftime. St Kilda kicked the first goal and the only goal of the third quarter. They kept the Suns to just 2 points. Ultimately, they missed their opportunity here. They could have got this game a lot closer going into 3-quarter time. They only kicked 1 goal, 6. So ultimately, they scored 12 points, kept the Suns to 2, but it was only a plus 10 differential in their favour, but it could have been a lot more. St Kilda kicked the first goal of the last quarter, but that woke the Suns back up. Then they kicked the next 3, built a winning margin, and then coasted for the rest of the game. St Kilda had 1 more scoring shot. They had 8 goals, 13-21 to the Suns, 12 goals, 8 behind, 20 scoring shots. In terms of inside 50s, Gold Coast were plus 12 inside 50s. I'll scroll back up here, 57-45. So even though St Kilda had 12 less inside 50s, they had more scoring shots. So they could have made this game much more of a contest had they been more accurate. And you can really see the difference between the size was a 12-8 compared to 8-13. Stoppages, 31-27 in favour of St Kilda. However, Gold Coast scored 25-23 points from stoppages. Turnovers, Gold Coast made more turnovers, 64. However, St Kilda only managed 38 points from those 64 turnovers, whereas Gold Coast scored 49 points from the Saints' 56 turnovers. So Gold Coast did what they needed to do. They just were that slightly more efficient side, and it stood up where it counted. Moving forward, St Kilda travelled to Darwin to play Melbourne, and then Gold Coast are back at home for the first time since round 7 against the Swans, and they'll be playing Fremantle. Looking at the ladder as it currently stands, Collingwood sit a half game clear on top, ahead of the Brisbane Lions, who are also a half game clear of the Gold Coast Suns. Those top 3 teams are a game clear of the Crows, Cats and Hawks, all on 28 competition points and 7 wins. Then you have the fringe sides, the Bulldogs, the Giants, the Dockers and the Bombers, all on 24. Melbourne have pushed up to 5 wins now, sitting on 20 points. So it is looking like those 5 teams will... So basically 1 to 11 is setting up to be the teams that fight out the top 8 spots this season. Carlton, Swans, St Kilda and Port Adelaide all on 4 wins. Each of those teams basically need to go on a run and win 3 straight, or win 3 or 4 games in the next month and a half, and to get back into contention. If any of those sides lose their next 2 games, they'll be out of contention based on where they're currently sitting at this stage of the season. Going 4-9, 4-10, your season is done. It's too far back from there. Especially, obviously, it will depend on their draws, and that's obviously another factor. However, you'd need to go on an extremely good run in order to work your way back into contention from there. So that's my look at round number 11. Round 12 looks to be an interesting round. We have a few teams with buys. There's some big favourites. We're going to be covering each one of these games in depth. Game of the round, Collingwood versus Hawthorn. That sets up to be a really good game. Important game for the Swans and Adelaide as well. That'll be played in Sydney. And also important game for Melbourne and St Kilda this week. Those are the 3 probably most standout games. Gold Coast versus Fremantle. That also sets up to be an interesting game as well, with the Gold Coast being back at home. But each of these games, stay tuned for the AFL round 12 betting preview. We'll go through the trends, the betting analysis for these games, look at their previous matchups, and I'll go through how I'm looking at betting on those games. So stay tuned for that video. There's also NRL previews. I will have a look at the state of origin, try scores, all that to come this week. Really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you in the next video.